Enzo Maresca has decided to part companies with Chelsea Football Club and will no longer be their manager. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. I know this video is going out a day after the news broke, but because of the holidays, I haven't quite got around to get into filming this. But I've got a lot of thoughts on this, and they're mainly negative when it comes to Chelsea Football Club, how they're operating at the moment. And I have to start off with, first of all, surprise, because yes, over the last 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, ever since the Everton game, and Enzo Maresca gave that press conference where he was talking about how it was the worst 48 hours in his tenure at Chelsea, that he felt the most isolated, most alone, didn't have the support. And everyone started then talking about what on earth is he on about? Is he on about the players? Is it about higher ups in the boardroom? And since then, there's always been a little rumbling going on. And because it has been over the holiday season, it hasn't quite been addressed and had the same talk around it. And no one's really tried to go, what exactly is he on about? Well, I think we now know exactly what it's on about because clearly he isn't happy with the higher ups at Chelsea and he decided to part company with Chelsea and is no longer the manager. And I think this is just first of all, my initial reaction is this is just a massive shame for everyone involved. I don't really think there's a winner from this. I think there are some people who come out looking better and some people come out looking worse. But really, the best case scenario for Chelsea was to have Enzo Maresca the manager. The best case scenario for I think for Enzo Maresca at this time was to be the manager of Chelsea. And ultimately, it's the players and the fans who are losing out here because when he came in from Leicester City, it did seem like a bit of an ambitious managerial appointment because he was just managing the Championship. He was Pep Guardiola's assistant before that. Is he really the right man to be taking over Chelsea, the behemoth, the size of the club that Chelsea is? And it was a risk, but one that was seemingly starting to work out. He got them the win in the Conference League. He helped them to win the first ever Club World Cup, the expanded version. And now Chelsea, who were under a little bit of pressure because they've not been performing as well, but still you expect them to sort things out and then get themselves back in the Champions League places by the end of the season. They're still in the Champions League as well, doing really well in that. And you just thought that the things were going not perfect, but on an upward trajectory. And I think more so than the stats, that was the feeling around Chelsea. And I think my perspective as someone who's not Chelsea fan looking from the outside, I was thinking in a few years, as if they keep going the way they are, they're on the right path. And now it feels like they're taking a little bit of a step back because I do think that Enzo Maresca was doing a good job and that this him and his coaching staff and this playing squad were heading into a direction in which I could see the plan that Bluco and Todd Bowley and Clearlake had and was working because for so long when Chelsea started this project under Clearlake that I thought to myself, I'm just not convinced by it. I don't think it's going to work out. They're signing too many players. How are you going to build a team chemistry, cohesion, and how are you going to get that with those players to work together and then eventually together all the young players to become title challengers, Champions League challengers? How's that ever going to work? But now, after a few years, I've started to see the benefits of the project, the fact that they can still sell the players they don't want for more money, and the fact that the ones that you do like and the players that are working, you can keep those, and they can become the foundations that you build around. And under Enzo Maresca, they were starting to develop a winning mentality. They won, like I said, the Club World Cup. They won the Conference League. They're in the Carabao Cup semi-finals still. It just feels like it's been the momentum now has been halted. The breath out of Chelsea Football Club is, someone's popped a balloon essentially, and it kind of just feels like the worst thing to happen. And let's probably start at the beginning because I suppose there were reports coming out that Enzo Maresca was talking to other clubs and Manchester City, and that was the big rumor that Pep Guardiola was supposedly thinking about leaving at the end of the season, and therefore Manchester City were lining up Enzo Maresca. And it has since come out after Enzo Maresca decided to leave that he's been talking to Manchester City. He's also talking to Juventus, and I think right now to me that's not a very appealing proposition, Juventus. But I think to an Italian manager, Juventus is probably one of the most appealing jobs you could have. So I can see why that was enticing for him. But apparently, under his contract, he had to come out and he had to tell Chelsea that there were approaches and there were discussions being had. And maybe Enzo Maresca thought that he had more strength than he did and he was in a position of power with the Chelsea hierarchy. And that he thought he could maybe try and weasel his way into a new contract. But then Chelsea hierarchy was like, no, you're not in charge here. We dictate. You don't dictate to us. And maybe he overplayed his hand a little bit. And maybe he didn't quite get the reaction that he wanted. But I think if you're trying to build a project and then you're also, flirting with other clubs, then I think there has to be a little bit of back and forth, and maybe you go, okay, that's fair enough. But to get to a point, and I'm just speculating here, to get to a point where it's untenable and you feel like you can no longer carry on because Enzo Maresca hasn't been sacked. They've parted companies is the official phrase, and things have been said that Enzo Maresca decided to not take up his full pay packet and decide to have little bit a reduction in that in order to help process this move forward and that so he can leave. I find that incredibly weird because Premier League managers nowadays, I don't think they should ever really resign because I think the amount of money and the length of contract that they're given, and that's given to them by the clubs. I think the clubs should really have to pay out if they don't want to manage anymore. But clearly, Enzo is willing to sacrifice a portion of that money because I just want to get out of here. And I find that so weird because what must have gone on? And obviously, I don't know for certain. There are rumours that he's fallen out with Ed Barley, someone higher up in the Blueco organisation, and who's also a massive part of Chelsea. Apparently, he also fell out with Pochettino, and apparently he hasn't been great with some of the other managers as well. If that's the case, then you probably need to start looking at him. But again, it's shock because I never thought it was going to end up with Enzo Maresca leaving. Maybe I was naive in that instance, and Chelsea fans, you'll have to let me know. But I thought it was we're going to come to some resolution. We're going to maybe give you some more players that you want. We'll give you a new contract. There were rumours that Chelsea were interested in signing Antoine Semenyo, a player who at 26 is significantly older than some of the other players they've been buying. Maybe that could have demonstrated a change in formula and how they were trying to operate, and maybe going about trying to help Enzo Maresca achieve those goals and ambitions. But I think Enzo Maresca was let down because if you can't get him the players that he needs, that or he thinks he needs to win the Premier League and win the Champions League, then how can you judge a manager based on not giving him the tools? You just got to base him on the job that he's done and the resources that he has. And so I don't expect Enzo Maresca to be winning the Premier League or winning the Champions League. But if he does, I think that's great, and you give him even more credit and give him even more of his flowers because of that. But I just go back to, I think this is sad for Chelsea fans because you would have wanted Enzo Maresca. They were warming to him. I don't think the majority of Chelsea fans wanted him to go. But now you're stuck in the situation where he has gone, and I think he will be absolutely fine. In terms of people who come out of this, I think he comes out positively because under Clearlake and Blueco and Todd Bowley, Chelsea have had a couple of managers now, and because of the chaotic nature around Chelsea, they can come out of this and go, yeah, but that's kind of that's his own rule and exception. You can't really judge based on what goes on at Chelsea. And so I think he comes out of this after jumping from Leicester, from the Championship to the Premier League, and then leaving that season and going, do you know what, I'm better than this. He comes out of this now Chelsea job with a super high reputation, winning 2 trophies, a European trophy, regardless of what you want to say about the Conference League, and also winning the first ever expanded version of the Club World Cup. His stock is super high now. And if Pep Guardiola was to leave at the end of this season, maybe the next, and Enzo Maresca was still hanging around and still, knocking on the door, I think Man City should probably go for him. I think that makes complete sense. And if someone like Juventus were talking to him at the time, I think that also makes sense for him. So I think he's going to, because of the structure around Chelsea, I think he will go on to bigger and better things right now. And so the question I have is who comes in next? And a lot of people are talking about Liam Rosenior, the manager of Strasbourg in France, and I really like Liam Rosenior. I first noticed him when he was managing Hull in the Championship, and then when he went abroad, you don't really see a lot of English managers going abroad, and I was keeping a little bit of an eye on him. I haven't watched too much, but what I've seen and what I've heard, most importantly, is a lot of positive things, and I think he is an up-and-coming English manager that a lot of people are looking really forward to and seeing what he's going to do in the future. But I do think it's the future and not now. Chelsea, like I said, are a behemoth of a football club. It can eat you up and spit you back out, and they'll carry on like nothing happened. And I do worry about Liam Rosenior because some of the interviews I've seen, he's very open, he's very honest, he's not afraid of trying to get everyone to like him. And I just think that Chelsea's not that kind of football club. Even though they have changed direction in the last few years, I don't think you can do that with Chelsea. I think you almost, Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, Antonio Conte, the manager is almost, they are a figurehead of the club that will drag everyone with them. They will bring you on board with their charisma and their tactics, and they want serial winners. And I just don't think that even with a change of strategy in recent years, Liam Rosenior is the type of manager. I just don't think he's a Chelsea manager, because I was thinking about if you were Rosenior and thinking about what you're going to do next, you maybe want to go to another club in Europe and go, all right, I want a team who are regularly in Champions League. I want to manage a club who are on a slightly larger scale to Strasbourg. And then eventually, if I can do well there, then maybe I can come back to the Premier League and one of the big six clubs. But I think now, to make the move now, I think it's too soon, and I think it's too big a job. But you got to play devil's advocate. Is it too big a job for him to turn down? Because clearly, Bluco have a strategy. They want the manager. They've clearly handpicked Liam Rosenior and put him into Strasbourg and gone, right, here you can develop in a top five league, and then you can also play in Europe as well, and you can become a better and better manager. And then when we need you for the big job, the Chelsea job, you can come in and you can do it. And so actually, I was thinking to myself, if Liam Rosenior was to say no, which in my opinion is probably the right thing for his career right now, how well would that go down with Bluco? Because he would be in a chance of jeopardizing his career at Strasbourg right now. Because if you're not going to take the Chelsea job, then what use do Bluco have for you? If Strasbourg isn't going to be the developmental, isn't going to be the sister club to Chelsea, isn't going to be the developmental pathway to get you to the Chelsea job eventually. And so, might not be right away, but it could be in the summer. Bluco might go, well, if you're not going to take the Chelsea job, mate, well, we don't need you anymore. And in the summer, they go, we're going to part ways with you. Thank you very much. Nothing personal. And they'd be well within the right to do that. So I think Liam Rosenior is in a very tricky position. And I think he almost has to take the Chelsea job if it is offered to him. And I think it will be offered to him. And I think he'll say yes. But I don't think it's the right job for him right now. And I don't think he's the right manager for Chelsea right now. But if I say that, who do I think is the right manager for Chelsea? And this is the problem that I have, because Enzo Maresca was a risk, but it was a risk that was seemingly working out, and now it's all gone. All the hard work he's done is gone. The 2 trophies he's won with these players is gone, and now you've almost got to start afresh. Hopefully you can get a new manager in who can just build on that and keep going. But is that actually going to happen? Is what you think is going to happen and what actually happens is two very different things in football, and we've all seen it over the years. So I am struggling because I believe there's not a lot of elite managers in the world right now. And I think if you look at the top 6 clubs at the moment, Pep Guardiola is obviously the best manager in the world in my opinion right now, and he's the exception. But then you've got Arteta, who was a club legend, had no first team experience at Arsenal. You got Thomas Frank at Spurs, who is a manager who's not got any experience of managing at the highest level, and Spurs is the biggest job he's ever had, and he's coming from a middle of the table Premier League club. Then look at Liverpool and Manchester United with Slot and Amram, both managers coming from outside the top 5 leagues. A little bit of a gamble. Liverpool, it seems to work out. Man United, so far, not quite. But those both were gambles. And then you've got Chelsea with Enzo Maresca, who was a gamble coming from the Championship, but it was working. And that's what's annoying, because the next manager is going to be a risk. But what if it doesn't work? Then you set yourself back even further for a bad managerial decision and letting Enzo Maresca leave and not keeping him happy at the club. But I suppose it works both ways. So the manager, I've deleted and dallied. The rumoured managers, apart from Liam Rosenior, are Felipe Luis, the former Chelsea player who I think is managing at Flamengo in Brazil. I hope I got that right. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen any of him. I got to be honest, I haven't seen any of him. It feels like a long shot, and I'm not entirely sure how that would go. I personally wouldn't go for him. Cesc Fabregas was an option, but apparently he seems to be distancing himself from the job. I'm not entirely sure either, but I am more open to that suggestion than I am someone like a Felipe Luis. You have Andoni Iraola, another manager at a lower Premier League club. Could he make the jump up? I'm not entirely sure Iraola is the right fit for Chelsea, even though I do think he's a good manager. I think his style of play with the high intensity, the pressing. I look at the current Chelsea squad and how much of a fit is that to Iraola's style of football. And I think Reece James, he's been fit for so long now, you really don't want to do anything to jeopardise that. But also recently, Romeo Lavia has always had injury issues. Cole Palmer this season hasn't really been fit for a large part. Do you really want to be risking some of your best players picking up injuries if they're not quite resilient enough to make their way out of it? And also, these are young players, so you want the players to develop and to develop the best they can. They need to be on the pitch. So I'm not quite sure Iraola is the right manager for Chelsea right now. But in terms of experience, in terms of being the kind of manager and the personality that I think could work for Chelsea, there were two names that for me I think stand more than the rest. One was Roberto De Zerbi, who's currently at Marseille, because he's previously managed in the Premier League, because he's at Marseille in the Champions League right now, because he's an Italian manager, and I think he could work really well at Chelsea, and because of the fact that I think the style of play will complement Chelsea really, really well with the young players that he has. He's one that I would consider. But I think my personal pick, and I don't think this is going to happen, but this is just what I would do. I think I would go for Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace. He only has 6 months left in his contract. There are rumours that he wants to leave and he wants to make that next step up in his career. I think he'd be relatively cheap to take from Crystal Palace right now. He's not entirely happy with the investment coming in, even though it looks like they might be signing Brendan Johnson. I think he would quite happily work with the back four. He could develop those players. I think he would also command the respect of those Chelsea players, and they could have him. And I think I would personally go for Oliver Glasner. It doesn't have to be for 5, 6, 7 years. Chelsea don't have to try and build for like the massively long term. But you want someone for at least for 3, 4 years so they can build something initially and then hopefully win something at the end of it. And I think these Chelsea players would respect Oliver Glasner. I worry with Liam Rosenior, is it going to go a bit more like Graham Potter? Is he too nice a guy? Is he too inexperienced? Can he not handle the pressure? And after Graham Potter, I just hope that Chelsea don't make the same mistake or a similar mistake. Although I think Liam Rosenior, after having seen what happened to Graham Potter, will probably do it a little bit differently. But there we go. Those are my thoughts. Enzo Maresca is gone. What a start to the new year this has been in the Premier League. Liam Rosenior looks like he's probably going to be coming in. I'm not entirely sure about that, I'll be honest. But if he gets it, I hope he does well because he seems like a nice enough guy. But is it the right club for Chelsea right now? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.